let's talk a little bit first about just the news so we're all up to speed, okay? So let me get Firefox up. So Polygon sold to Valnet and hit with mass layoffs by Ethan Gatch, very good reporter at Kotaku. The video game website Polygon has been sold to click-farm powerhouse Valnet, and much of its masthead has been laid off, Kotaku has learned. The sale was subsequently announced in a press release. Multiple staff members have posted online about losing their jobs or about colleagues now being out of work. I'm no longer with Polygon. If you're hiring, please consider the many talented writers and editors now on the market, posted Polygon co-founder and EIC Chris Plant. Every one of them deserves a spot on your staff. I won't be talking more about the sale because I wasn't involved. Going to hang out with my kid, taking wins where I can. The sale was confirmed in a press release which did not mention the layoff. The price of the deal was not disclosed. Sources tell Kotaku that deputy editor Maddie Myers and games editor Zoe Hanna are among those that remain at Polygon. Executive editor Chelsea Stark said the layoffs included over 20 staff. Vox Media did not respond for comment. I'll say more later, but I no longer have a job, shared senior reporter Nicole Carpenter. I'm looking for work, as are so many of my amazing colleagues. I have lots of ideas and things I'd like to write. I'm really in shock. I had a great time working at Polygon, posted senior writer Michael McWhorter. Please let me know if you have any cool job openings. Founded in 2012 under Vox Media, the site quickly established itself as one of the premier outlets for original reviews, reporting, and cultural analysis in the world of gaming. So, obviously, not a fun day today in the world of games journalism. I'm going to put this while I buy the battle pass. Here's what you need to know about Polygon, first of all, since I'm sure there's some folks here that don't know much about Polygon. So Polygon, I would say, was a bit of an institution in games journalism. It's been around for a hot minute now. Let me actually check the specific year. So Polygon opened in 2012 and was owned by Vox for 13 years straight. And then Valnet purchased it today, or officially went through today. I think what a lot of people need to understand about Polygon is one of the few sites in the games journalism industry that has been allowed to avoid the SEOification, the content farmification of the games journalism and games media industry. So there's probably some folks here wondering what exactly I mean by that, right? And so basically, here's what I mean, okay? So the way that games journalism works right now, and I've talked about this a little bit, but I think for some folks, maybe, you know, this might be your first time hearing about this kind of conversation, or you might not know much about it, which is very understandable. I know there's a couple folks that might not know much about any of this stuff. So Polygon, because it was part of Vox, was allowed to remain slightly unscathed from a change in media approaches in games journalism over, I would say, the past couple years. So around circa 2023, there was a major Google algorithm change that impacted all of media, including games, but every media landscape was affected in some shape or form, from feminism to LGBT topics to sports to cars, whatever topic you're writing about, everything changed pretty significantly in the SEO, in the relationship Google had with media. So basically, here's what happened. The Google algorithm started to prioritize user-generated content. Google understood, hey, look, people are not going to say, they're not necessarily going to like random sites on the internet for advice about what hardware to buy, what products to buy. And what they're doing is they're searching let's talk about the Oculus Quest, right? They're searching Oculus Quest headset Reddit review. Google understood that people were starting to prioritize getting user-generated reviews. This also kind of ties in with the idea of an understanding that people were searching for things like YouTube videos because there was a feeling that YouTube was a better source. Oof. Hey, Sleeping Egg. There's an understanding that YouTube was a better source than some forms of journalism had become, which I don't think is an unfair analysis, because I definitely see you. I hear you, Roz, saying I genuinely think SEO killed the internet sometimes, because you're not wrong, but it's a very complicated situation, and I want to re-explain the situation so we're all on the same page. So basically, what ended up happening was Google changed its algorithm. It was in a response to AI-generated content to a certain extent. It was a response to Google realizing people were not just searching for, did not want to click on, you know, like GameSpot or Verge for reviews. What they really wanted was like YouTube videos and Redditors, like giving, you know, like what they believed as trusted randos, trusted sources outside the media landscape. Damn, that was pretty good. Making just like giving their viewpoint, their opinion about like what products to buy and things of that nature. So there was a significant Google algorithm change in 2023. And that Google algorithm change basically affected everything. That Google algorithm change changed everything. It tanked a lot of websites. And I think there is a good conversation to have about the media landscape prioritizing search and clicks and fast content creation over high quality reporting. Like, I don't think that's untrue. I think like the ROI startup, like unicorn startup, you know, mindset of VCs just like pumping in content, pumping in money to try to get a return on investment by people pumping out content, like that definitely ruined journalism in its own way. Like, it's not just Google's fault. What I'm saying is like gamers and by extension Valnet, which we'll talk about more, ruined journalism. So it's like kind of crazy. Like places like that ruin journalism. So it's like, it's really funny that like Valnet is collecting Polygon. I'm not saying funny in a haha way. It's funny in a very depressing and sad way. Like, it's one of those ironies of life, you know? It's like, it's like Valnet like destroyed the journalism industry and it gets rewarded with fucking Polygon. Like, that's sick. Like, we live in a sick world for that to happen. So anyway, so what ended up happening is this Google algorithm drops. The sites are devastated. It's already not been great for media. Like, the writing has been on the wall. The money is starting to dry up. Places are having layoffs. I believe by this point, BuzzFeed had already had a couple and stuff like that. Like, it's not like everyone was flush for cash and had like a war chest to deal with this. But this algorithm was kind of like the final nail in the coffin for a lot of places that were trying to avoid layoffs. So a significant amount of layoffs were already hitting media at this point, but certain industries were hit harder than others. Here's how I would put it, right? If you're covering something where you legitimately are hiring a lot of reporters that have a high level of expertise, and quite frankly, you're probably going to be providing, like, still working in a way where your media landscape is still fun. Goddamn, this KJ is like, got my number. If you're functioning in a way where you bye-bye. If you're functioning in a way where you are still hiring highly skilled, high-quality reporters to report out the news, then it's not really that much of an issue for you. Like, it still is, but it's lessened a little bit. What I mean, for instance, is that maybe folks working in, say, politics, right, where they had reporters that would demonstrate a high level of skill. You know, a lot of places that did work in politics, like WAPO or LA Times, still dealt with the layoff, but the fall off might not be quite as bad as, say, the games industry, where things are completely wiped. And unfortunately, what happened in the games industry is, yes, it did become completely. It started to go through this real period of. Oh God, I got double swung. Real period of. God, what's the term? Almost like atrophying. Essentially, the writing was on the wall in the games journalism industry that having, and I've talked about this a lot, but a lot of this is like going over important territory because it's the story of how all this happened, right? Because I talked to a lot of journalists who still don't understand why this is happening, and I'm not defending things like Polygon being sold to a content mill, but there is a logic to it, even if it's a very messed up story. And so some industries are naturally going to be more affected than others based on demonstration of expertise, voice, authority. There's some complicated Google algorithm stuff that determine what sites would or wouldn't be affected, and 1 HP in a dream, that's crazy. But the TLDR is that games journalism is an industry that, because of places ironically like Valnet, but also places like Gamers, was significantly impacted by this Google algorithm change because the games journalism model has shifted so drastically. We have gone from hiring writers that can demonstrate a high level of expertise. Nope. A high level of expertise in certain games and write really skilled strategy guides to caring more about hitting SEO keywords as fast as possible and getting traffic from that as fast as possible while allowing quality to be sacrificed slightly. We've allowed... Oh, Harbor's in second place too. That's not good. Okay, bye-bye. GG. Shrinkage. I love how they changed this music to the OG stuff. This is sick. I've wanted them to do it for a while. Shrinkage, atrophying, the music journalism industry too. Yeah, stagnation. So I think stagnation is what I'm looking for. I've used it to help me with a couple problems I had with Python. Oh, you're talking about AI. Oh my god, she's slaying and dropping knowledge at the same time. It do be like this, the shitification. Shitification is part of it for sure. God, I love this like OG music. It's so good. Okay. Okay, but here's what you need to know. So games journalism had moved to this model where there's a priority of getting traffic and getting people who are decently enough experienced with a game to write guide. And compare that with a YouTuber who like lives and breathes a certain game. So Oblivion Remastered is a really good example, right? There were definitely places like, say, at Gamers in Valnet that were rushing to write out guides about like, you know, like, say, I don't know, like the top, they're probably writing shit like, you know, like the top like they're trying to get all these top search results for guides for Oblivion Remastered the moment it came out. They probably got like a couple people on the game or just trying to do everything that people were searching for based on looking at like Google information, right? Now, you can assign like 5 people who never played the first Oblivion and barely played like 30 hours of Oblivion Remastered to do guides, right? Or you could work with a YouTuber, or you could have that happen. Or you as the reader, you as the person searching for information about Oblivion Remastered, could go on a YouTube and go to like the Oblivion guy and like with 5,000 bajillion subscribers, 500,000 bajillion subscribers, and very clearly know that this guy lives, breathes, and fucks Oblivion. And know whatever tutorial or whatever information, you know, the Oblivion guy that lives, breathes, fucks, and like faps to Oblivion is going to put out, you know for a fact that like whatever he puts out is going to be like S-tier expertise with like perfect facts and perfect insight and very good analysis, versus the games journalist who's put in like maybe 30 hours in the game and is just trying to hit keywords that his boss assigned him to do. Like, which are you gonna choose, right? I'm gonna choose the YouTuber, and I don't say that lightly. I say that because I have read a lot of Valorant guides out there. I've done like videos about this. I've read Valorant guides out there and been like, oh my god, like I have like 1,300 hours in this game and I'm reading a guide from someone with 100 hours who's giving like the worst lineups and strats, right? Like this is common sense at this point. And we only got there because games journalists' reputation had taken such a hit because of the fact that the industry moved to this model. One example we heard recently was guides like how to find the best weapons and not bring up the level capping effects on items, so your endgame weapon would forever be stuck at level 3. Yeah, stuff like that, right? It's just like by nature, like there's a certain lack of expertise that's been shown in games journalism. It's stuff like that, right? It's like, it's a situation where it's like, games journalists over time, because of this business model, started to gain a reputation of not knowing what they were writing about or talking about. And the games journalism business model and the games journalism industry fundamentally was not built to support high expertise writers working in like 2 or 3 games, because it was profit-wise unsustainable. It was the only way to make a profit in the industry and sustainably run a publication, because of the business model that had come to exist in digital journalism, was to have journalists who are jack of all trades and Jane of all trades and they thems of all trades, masters, mistresses, and mixes of none, because that's what you needed them to do. You needed someone to be a Valorant expert in 2020 June and then like become an Elden Ring expert a couple years later to stay on top of trends, right? And I don't blame that business model. It made sense for a significant portion of time. It was like somewhat working. It's just eventually it didn't, you know? This is not the fault of games journalists, okay? It's not, you know, your random games journalist's fault that they were set up to fail. And it doesn't mean that games journalists are bad journalists, right? They are literally trying their best. You will see consistently games journalists who are very talented occasionally get a fact or two wrong with the games that they're writing about, because they are trying as best as possible to cover a wide breadth of topics, because that is the norm in games journalism. And people who are generally skilled at understanding an industry but not specific topics, not specific games, are naturally going to be imperfect writers, imperfect, you know, lack a certain level of expertise with the topic in question. It is nice. Well done. it is the nature of that situation. So what ended up happening is Google basically just started to understand what was going on, okay? So Google started to understand that games journalists had lost some reputation and that the algorithm was sending people to games journalists' websites that users did not want to read. And so over time, this changed. And I think a lot of games journalists don't want to have this conversation, but it is important because a lot of this is about Google making decisions around the data and around the relationship between gamers and games journalism. Like, this is partly about the business model causing a rupture. Like, that is a huge part of it. Hey, Mish. All journalists are journalists have to fail. It's so true. JJ Jamison votes. Get me a Balatro expert. Good to have you, Sarah. Wait, so Google has deliberately been tampering with search results prior to some sites over others. So the reason why they have done that is because users have demonstrated a certain preference, right? And the algorithm updated for that as a result. Google did specifically fuck over a lot of games journalism websites, but it is a reflection of a business model being propped up by a lot of publishers that's not working. Like, the SEO model is just not entirely feasible, is sort of the point I'm trying to make. So what ended up happening is essentially, because it became clear, because the Google algorithm changed to accommodate the fact that people were losing respect for games journalists and for journalists as a whole, because of this business model that wasn't working. Industries that had moved into the sort of like, we don't care if you're a really good expert, we just need like the content out there. Industries that pivoted to that content strategy got crushed by the Google algorithm. And the industry was in general already in a vulnerable state in games journalism and across media in particular, but especially games journalism. And this was like a killing blow for a lot of places, which is why you started to see essentially this kind of like domino effect where like one publication after another started to suffer. Notice that was especially places that didn't even have like a SEO strategy that started to very quickly lay people off. And then places with an SEO strategy also started to lay people off in droves too. I'm not saying that places that had an SEO strategy were spared. Like, that's not true. Look how many places that people at Gamers were laid off. But there was a domino effect and then also a consolidation further into SEO to stem the bleeding. You could see this at Gamers. All the Gamers websites became SEO slop, like The Escapist and Destructoid became that. You could see this with Kotaku, where guides became more important. You could even see this at Polygon, where guides became more and more important there as well. The monopoly has been incredibly damaging. SEO is so exhausting. It's really bad. Balatro is actually one of the free PSN games this month. I didn't even realize that. Also, thank you for the channel points, Roz. Kind of like how capitalism folds in upon itself. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these publishers felt that like doubling and quadrupling down on SEO would be great for them, and that turned out to not be the case. I think personally what should have happened was, I think the investment system where VCs invest into a publication, and then the idea that VCs invest into a publication are looking for a return on investment over time is just not feasible. What should be happening is more of the aftermath and like defector style approach in games journalism, where years ago, years and years ago, instead of signing up for the SEO slop like business model, publications should have started to build out a readership model where the goal was to break even. Unfortunately, saying this is like, yes, absolutely, I wish that was the case, but I feel honestly like I'm a hippie for even suggesting that, because that was just never going to happen, okay? Like, that was just never going to happen in games journalism. That was never going to happen because people had believed so much that SEO was the winning move. And so what ended up happening was this doubling and quadrupling down on SEO caused, and also places that didn't have a traffic model at all besides just like vibes-based reporting. They just started to fall apart because there was no really good solid structure for like making money in a way that allowed these companies to break even and build like monetization outside of the Google structure. And so essentially what happened is, layoffs started to hit the games industry after these algorithm changes were sort of like this final bit of weight on the industry that could not be sustainable. And most publications ended up having to double down on SEO. I believe a lot of the reporters at Polygon who were just doing straight up news did in fact have to do guides writing as well. Like, I think Nicole even was doing some. I'm not sure. I'd have to double check that. That's the impression I got. Anyway, this is all to say that eventually I suspect what happened is I kind of suspect that things were maybe not looking so great internally at Vox, and they decided to make a decision that like something needed to be cut loose. And Polygon probably was considered like the straggler because the site was probably already getting beat up by changes to the Google algorithm. And I believe there was also a recent Google change, but that probably didn't affect this deal at all. Now, it's very funny that Valnet gets Polygon, and again, not funny in a haha way, but funny in a fucked up way, because Valnet, you know, is like one of the major sources of, or not sources, but one of the major advocates of truly doing SEO slop in every sense of the word. They're completely and utterly an SEO slop based place. They do stuff for search traffic. They do stuff for what we call Google Discover. Valnet, which owns things like Collider and like Valnet owns, so they own Screen Rant, Game Rant, CBR, Movie Web. They own The Gamer. They own Dual Shockers. They own Hardcore Gamer. They own what is this, Extra Life? I actually haven't heard of that one. And also some other stuff too. How to Geek, Pocketland, Android Police, XDA. Is there anything else that's worth noting that they own? They also branch out into like cars too. But yeah, they own like a lot of what I would consider like the mid-tier big websites that are also kind of a little bit low-key considered slop. Like we all kind of think of them as like the slop shops. That is like their specialty. Extra Life, the site is a bit of a mess, but it top searches a lot. Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the thing is like Valnet does what it does, and Valnet is notorious for paying writers very low, but having like this fine-tuned search optimized approach, because Valnet has taken it down to a science. Now, the flip side is that Valnet's successfully been able to like make itself prominent on Google searches and Google Discover and stuff like that, but it's come at a massive cost. Like most people that have worked at Valnet have said, terrible place to work, awful place to work, low pay for a lot of work. All the writing that I did there, you know, was like pushed out. It felt like, you know, it felt like it was like forced out. It was not really my best stuff, you know, things like that, right? Like Valnet has this, you know, they've made the model work for the landscape at a tremendous cost for the talent there, is what I'm saying. And there's a feeling that everyone there that has worked there there's a feeling that they've gotten writing squeezed out of them. It's honestly happening with all journalism, but the trends aren't as obvious to pick up in the ways you just explained. Yeah, I know also a lot of this stuff because of my work prior in editorial strategy, so it's kind of in like the room where it happened at a company that cared a lot about like doing, you know, this kind of SEO style, like hit Google search hard shit. The goal is growth year over year, but the only thing in nature that keeps growing is cancer. That's like such a metaphor. Advertising is part of the problem that affects print too. I worked for a B2B newspaper and I hated it. I left after a month because they constantly pandered to advertisers in the most unethical way. That's also another major problem that 404 Media talked about recently. Thanks for the follow, Marina. I appreciate it. Good to have you. It didn't help that a lot of games journalists also had a habit of making content that was deliberately meant for controversy rather than proper content, which led to journalists not being taken seriously. For example, IGN's numerous attempts at bashing Sonic to someone not getting past the Cuphead tutorial. Okay, so the Cuphead tutorial, first of all, I feel like that's such a good example of people misunderstanding what was going on. So the guy that was doing the Cuphead tutorial was like reviewing the game. First of all, he's an incredibly good journalist. Like if you think my rating is good, if you think I'm good, he's far better at this job than I am. So I'm gonna put that out there right away. So he's talented and skilled. The other thing is that he was like on a show floor doing like a ton of like journalistic work, like previewing shit, talking to people and stuff like that. So that guy was not playing at like peak levels of gamer, okay? No wonder why he was like a little confused and tired. I think also too, like I'm not gonna lie, like if there's also like the concept.
I don't know how to play Jet.
I believe in you.
Well, I don't know how to play yours, so.
I was reading the Conquest episode of Incredible series, an actual clickbait IGN article. I haven't seen it actually.
No one wants to hear it.
These guys are crazy. I already know these guys are gonna be crazy. Okay.
Shut up.
The end result of Valnet, getting that down to a science, okay, is that it did come at a great cost, right? Like it did, it's a business model where you are churning people out and there's a lot of turnover. And you have to pay them a small amount for the level of quantity of articles you need to do because you are looking for getting that article that like fucking pops off, right? It is like fundamental to all this whole entire process, right? You were looking for that pop-off piece. So you just need to pay people a lot to see if you finally get that. Yeah, black company levels of capitalism. Sorry. Anna once had 2 hardcore foot fetishism begging her in chat. I remember they wanted my feet so bad. So what's unfortunately ended up happening is the situation where The whole entire industry has decided that SEO is the way to go. The whole entire industry has decided that searching, tracking, and following Google search is the way to go. Because everyone assumed that like the institution of Google search was just fucking solid. There was nothing bad was gonna happen. And unfortunately, that just wasn't fucking true. Like Google actually was just as prone to like being messed up for the industry and like failing us in the same way that like a lot of other institutions have existed. People thought that Google was an institution that was always going to favor us in a way that wasn't necessarily true, right? So that's just sort of like what happened. And a lot of these websites and companies have, unfortunately, because of decisions made by those at the top, you know, a lot of good journalists are unfortunately have been like screwed because of these decisions being made. Learning about how capital is ruining journalism. Literally true. Hi, Coop. So as for, so I believe that's why Polygon, though, was ultimately sold off to Valnet and Vox, like, made this decision. I suspect they were trying to cut their losses. I suspect they were looking at the return over investment and deciding, like, Vox itself, like, Vox.com was going to make numbers because of politics stories, because of the feeling that Vox was, like, putting out journalism that was, like, it still had maintained the trust of many people, but games journalism has increasingly lost trust from many folks. So I believe, I wouldn't be surprised if traffic was declining, if like the site was becoming less and less profitable, and Vox probably is already in a tight spot, and they decided like, okay, like we just gotta make a decision here. Let's get some money by just selling this place off. And so that's what I think happened. And then Valnet is going to take Polygon and is just going to put as much SEO as possible on that site. Okay, I'm cooking. Hi, Seraph. It's just business. It's just business. Wow, I've heard that a lot this week. I think it's why Polygon got sold off. This is not the fault of anyone working there. It's not the fault of any games journalist. Going back to your point, Silver Dude, earlier, I don't think it's really fair to criticize games journalists as like low skill just because they have a take that you disagree with. I mean, look at me, right? And my rating on Valor, right? Like that's actually, oh, thank you, Rexon. Look at my rating on, I'm gonna die. Look at my rating on Valor, right? A lot of people are like, look at this outsider tourist coming in, criticizing stuff, sour grapes, blah, blah, blah. But you would then talk to people over DM, and you would realize that actually a lot of people agreed with me about certain aspects of that article. They just didn't want to say it publicly, right? There'd be people DMing me and saying like, yeah, like I don't like what was going on with like their approach towards trans talent. I think it's kind of silly that they have like this basic ban, like basically a ban on F4F content. I think it's, you know, people they're saying like, yeah, you know, I think, I don't think Lolicon material should be at an AV-tuber agency, right? And so a lot of people would, you know, shit on that article, right? And act like what I was writing was like coming from a low skill place, right? Someone that didn't have proper like insight into like what real VTubers wanted. But that was like, you know, it's an ad hominem, right? It's like, it's always better to address the point of the topic of the article in question before immediately going there and saying, well, the problem is that this person is like trying to cause problems and be a clickbaiter and stuff like that. Like ad hominem is like, and I'm not trying to like call you out specifically. This is just my opinion. I feel that ad hominem is often something people decide to go to right away to criticize journalists. It's absolutely true that journalists have really had their reputation take a ding because of all of the business side of journalism, because the business side of journalism is hurting the public service of journalism, especially in like entertainment niche hobby fields. But I think every single time an article comes out that one disagrees with, it's important to consider. It's important to consider the conditions the article was made seriously. Like actually sit there and think about, do we think this is an opinion piece that was kind of like slopped up in an hour or two? Do we think this was something that was in the working for a little bit? Is a difference of opinion like something that we need to accept as sharing a space, right? Like a difference of opinion in VTubing, for example, is something I've come to understand that I have to accept, right? People are not going to agree with me about some things about VTubing. You know, I do think some things are beyond the pale, like bigotry, or like, you know, the promotion of like CSAM-ish material, right? Like that stuff, I don't think there's room for disagreement on personally, but I understand like there's going to be some disagreement about like, say, I don't know, like, there's going to be disagreement about like, you know, like should a journalist that, you know, originally like expressed public criticism of an agency while also saying like, I'd be potentially interested in applying, like it makes sense that people would be critical of me in that sense, right? Like I understand why people would be critical of me writing about Valor when I like had expressed this passing interest. I think it's a little silly that people got like that, right? Like I think like, you know, it became this big rumor that was crazy, and I think like it's a little silly to get upset at me for expressing this like very minor passing interest in maybe applying for something. Like I still have a right to criticize something that I never, you know, auditioned for, right? But I also have to accept like, okay, yeah, like my bad, you know what I mean? Like take the L. Anyway, like I understand why people feel the way that they do about like my rating on that topic. In the same way, I think it's important when it comes to games journalists having opinions we disagree with, not to criticize, you know, not to be like, oh, this games journalist is trying to clickbait. It's like, there's like no skill involved here. Like this person doesn't know what they're talking about. It's like, I think it's kind of like inappropriate to just make those character assessments, those character judgments without particular proof. It's not dissimilar between what's happening in the games industry and execs screwing over devs and the end result often being subpar games. It's not fair to blame the devs when execs are messing them around. Yeah, exactly. It's not a developer's fault if a game came out shitty. Like, it's not, okay? Like, a lot of times developers realize when they're putting lipstick on a pig. Like, it's not their fault. A lot of bad games are worked on by very good developers. So not to like call you out or anything, Silver Dude, I think that's like an important distinction to make. I think what's happening in games journalism right now, unfortunately, is the other day found Kirche's text file response to your article, and what blew my mind is she didn't even bother a little bit to deny her being transphobic. No one in the post is pointing out. People eventually pointed that out. I don't want to talk too much about this stuff, but I will say like I think I think it's a little crazy that like she didn't even address that. She's but I don't really want to talk about that too much. I want to stay on to the games journalism stuff. I know I brought up like some my prior reporting, so it's not it's all good that topic then came up too. I respect it coming up. Like it's I broached the conversation, so but yeah, she's quite the interesting character. I think like, yeah, I agree. I feel like, I think it's very telling that like she's not like trying to refute the transphobic thing she said, and like what she said was transphobic. What she said is like racist, you know. I'm really confused, but thank you for yapping. All good. Cherry Berry. Yeah, I think like what she said is like, I think it's very telling, you know. It's like, I think though, to go back to the Polygon stuff, I think the thing with Polygon is this. I think there's two reasons why people are responding very strongly today about Polygon being sold to Valnet. And one is because of the fact that Polygon itself is basically no more, right? Like this is the death of Polygon. It's not gonna exist the way it used to. The other reason why people are very upset is because I think we all know that this is a sign that we're kind of cooked. Like we're kind of cooked in games journalism. So don't worry about it. I don't feel called out. Simply stating that kind of goes both ways. The companies do screw over journalists, but it's also true that when some people make clickbait content, it does unfortunately reflect on their profession as a whole, even though we shouldn't let a few bad apples spoil the bunch. I do agree with you. I do think there's some people in the field who are looking for reactions, and I do think that stuff does hurt the field. So don't get me wrong either. I do agree with you as well, Silver Duda, that stuff is happening. The other thing is that I think there's this understanding that like we're kind of cooked. Games journalists have been pretty cooked since the Gamergate stuff. Yeah, I agree with Misha. I think it's a fair comment. So I think what's happened is this. Okay, so with Polygon's sale, what you need to understand, and this is how I've always conceived of the industry. I've always thought of there as being a couple websites that have existed in a way where they can do like really in-depth reporting, and they can do like sort of like feature and opinion content that goes above and beyond like sort of like the hot take stuff that you might see from like GamesBeat or whatever, right? Like there's these sites that have different calibers of content. Okay, so Kotaku is a really good example. Like think of how much could like change Kotaku's done on the industry, for the industry and on the industry. Think of all the reporting that like Nathan Grayson's done, that Gita Jackson's done, that, you know, Cecilia Anastasio's done, like when they were all at Kotaku, right? And isn't it kind of curious, right, that like none of them are at Kotaku right now? Like, you know what I mean? Like they're all gone from there. You know, Cecilia's at Bloomberg, Nathan's at Aftermath, and so is Gita. And I think one thing to keep in mind, oh god, with all this stuff is that there was a time when basically there were a couple sites that you knew for a fact were going to be doing content that was high quality and a cut above what you might normally get from the industry. So I've always felt this way about Kotaku, for example. Kotaku has always done content that, or did traditionally do content that was thought-provoking. They did like these long-form feature pieces. They did investigative stories. I mean, if you don't think that's true, if you don't think Kotaku's had a positive impact on the industry, literally just go search Riot investigative story Kotaku, okay? Like, there has been a significant change in games journalism because of literally Cecilia's work alone, okay? The industry has seen some major changes because of the fact that literally she exists. And that would have not happened without the advent of something like Kotaku, without Kotaku existing and giving her literally at the time the opportunity. Yeah, a lot of the journalists that did the really great articles of Sally Long left the industry. I mean, like, so what you're seeing though is like there would be these sites that were like high caliber places that were not traditional kind of like prestige places, right? You know, like Kotaku, Polygon as this like at the time was a new place in the 2010s. What happened over time is a lot of these places that were doing that reporting that was not like traditional reporting, right? I mean, that was not, they were doing like reporting or they were doing like these really in-depth and thought-provoking opinion pieces, right? That stuff started to go away. So Kotaku is a really good example, right? Kotaku lost the ability to really have like these in-depth investigative reported stories. And it started to become more and more guides based over time. We've hit this situation where like, it also shows a prominent sociality way people can look at one page in Polygon, Kotaku, IGN, and rather than looking at the individual writer form the opinion, they take it as an organization's opinion. You'll see that a lot. Like I see in my own reporting, people will be like, oh, you know, like Vice is trash. Vice did something dumb, you know, it's Vice, what did you expect? And it's like, well, that's you know, it's the fucking, whatchamacallit, that's an ad hominem, right? You're attacking like the association of the writer because you feel like 80 on breach. You feel like you're just like attacking like the character of like, or you're saying that the problem is like the publication, that you can't trust the publication. You're not even giving a specific reason why. You're just like green text Vice. And it's like, okay, well, okay, like that's not a real argument. That's just like arguing that like you don't like a publication, therefore you should not engage with what the publication says, which is like not a very mature way to engage with like journalism. that's like a you know, like a sports way to engage with things. Like, oh, you know, the team that I dislike wrote this piece, so I'm not gonna read it. It's like, oh, okay. One of the best articles I can think of is Rock Paper Shotguns on 3-part series on Pathologic. I remember that coming out. Yeah, it's a really good example. And RPS is still doing stuff, but RPS is also taking a hit too. RPS has lost some of the really kind of like thought-provoking writing that's been out there of the year. When it comes to places like Kotaku, right, and Polygon and Rock Paper Shotgun and a lot of the places that we think of that were doing either really good reporting or really good like criticism, right? There has been less and less room for that kind of work over time, over the years, because there's been more and more this push to do SEO, to getting serious about traffic acquisition, because things were like not exactly working. You know what I mean? Like that increasingly became these are literally all the same guys I was just playing with. That's so funny. That literally increasingly became more and more and more of a problem over time, because there had been this push to focus on targeting for things like Google search from a business perspective. This focus on like working for SEO, you know, search engine optimized content. So there was less room for the sort of criticism that flourished in the 2010s. And I find what ended up happening is publications have slowly seen a decline in the caliber and the courage of their work. I feel like I've seen this at Kotaku where I'm not saying journalists lack courage, okay? I'm saying the publication. Specifically the business strategy side of things. Folks that are directing, managing editors in EIC how to run the publication are making it harder and harder for writers to create content that is thought-provoking and measured and has a lot of investigative work going into it, because writers are not given the time and resources and capacity to do that kind of content. There are no special reporters at Kotaku, okay? There's no Cecilia 2. There's no Nathan 2, okay? Like, Polygon, you know, had Nicole Carpenter, and now there's never ever going to be a Nicole Carpenter again at Polygon, right? It's a situation where these publications have not allowed the capacity to have good journalism and good opinion writing fostering. And you might say, well, okay, I understand that from a journalism perspective, but what about all the opinion writing that you're talking about? And well, it's very simply put, you need to give people the time and the creative energy to think and to analyze. You cannot churn out opinion features. If you force people to churn, that's how you get like kind of like hot take clickbaity stuff that's like churned out in an hour and is kind of half baked and not fully thought through. To get the really good opinion and criticism writing that was coming out of Kotaku during the 2010s, you need to give people the ability to sit on an opinion piece for a couple days and really think about what they want to say. You know, some people can kind of just push out an opinion piece. I can, like I'm built different. But if if my job was to do that like every fucking day, I would not be able to do that. One of the nice things about Waypoint is that they allow me to write about whatever I want on any given day. So if I want to do like a opinion piece and then like do a couple quick hits after that to rest, like I can do that, you know? It's not that management doesn't want to take a chance. It's that management firmly believes that there is no chance to take. Management for so long has believed the only way out of, across publications, believe the only way out of issues of Google is to double down on SEO and traffic acquisition through Google search. And that is just proven quickly incorrect. I think part of the reason people view Polygon, Kotaku, RPS, etc. like teams and rather reading into all their articles is like because of how people think about non-gaming journalism, but they don't want to read left or right-wing articles. I think like there's this idea that like a publication has a certain political leaning, and like that is true. Like most publications do lean in a certain way in terms of bias and things of that nature. But people are very dismissive. And a lot of times, you know, there's a lot of people that would be pleasantly surprised. They think like all games journalists are like total like, you know, losers and stuff like that. And a lot of people would be pleasantly surprised to find that if they actually sat down and read some works of games journalism, that there are some very measured and interesting beliefs and responses that some people have. I will give you, that was not wise. I'll give you a really good example, okay? So in my own work, I write very measured articles about adult content, okay? So if I find out a game has non-con, I explore non-con, I explain what it is. I try to defend, you know, aspects of it when it's like, you know, between like consenting adults, you know, things like that. Or in the sense of like, you know, it's like when it's like non-con of like adult characters. Let me put it this way, you know, non-con, a fictional setting where everyone's adults and it's, you know, is artwork, none of it's real. Like I'm always going to defend that, especially in the realm of like concerns over censorship, you know what I mean? And so a lot of people that would dismiss Vice or my writing because they think like I'm going to be quote unquote too woke might actually be pleasantly surprised to find that my feelings and beliefs on censorship are actually might align with them in certain ways. They might actually read my article and say, oh, okay, I didn't realize, you know, ACValens actually will go out of her way to defend, you know, like content that some people might consider taboo, like The Coffin of Andy and Lele, you know, even though it's a game that explores incest themes. Or, you know, oh, I didn't realize that ACValens might defend like, I don't know, you know, certain forms of non-con hentai, or might defend Fudanari. Like I thought she would just like dismiss it right away. You know, like people make massive assumptions about my content. And if they gave me more of a chance, they would understand my politics for what get fucked. They would understand my politics for what they are, which is a little bit more complicated than people think. Yeah, absolutely. I am left-leaning, very left-leaning. I think for a lot of people, maybe more so than they might be comfortable with, no doubt. But you know, for some people in the games industry, like, yeah, I get that. Like, I think it's a little silly, like, but I understand that some people might be like super centrist oriented and my writing might not be for them. But if people gave me a little bit more of a chance, then instead of dismissing me because, you know, oh, games journalist, you know, they would understand like how I cook and what I write and what I offer in the industry. And they would start to understand that like maybe there was certain writing that was like, I don't know, SEO guides that I've done in the past that were imperfect because of the context of what I was writing in as opposed to the skills I have as a writer. If you don't mind me asking, is it difficult for you to come up with topics for these PSA type streams? Do you sit in your room planning your topic, or you just kind of wing it before you press the stream button? I just kind of wing it. Like I choose topics that I think about a lot and I just start talking about it. I'm only left leaning because that's the best tasting Twix. Like who's up with a life coach? But I thought churning people is what Preds do. I do. I churn people, not articles. The best tasting Twix is the one with the longest vein. Just like many things in life, you know what I'm saying? I think what's happened at places like Kotaku and Polygon, right, is that writers normally would be given the freedom to write about the topics that they think are important. And over time, I believe a lot of that focus has gone into you have to do like, you know, these trending news topics. You have to do these guides writing. You can't trust, you know, what you think is important to report about as a public service. Like that's not what we're doing anymore. You have to be writing for Google. And that's becoming the case. That became the case everywhere. It became the case at Kotaku. It became the case at Polygon. It slowly became the case everywhere. Is TLDR. I believe, honestly, a lot of these places have not been given the opportunity to really soar the way that they might have in the past. And they have been forced to play to this business model of SEO slop that has not been good for the industry or anybody. And so we got confused with the word churning before realizing it was a joke. Who's up getting churned, you know what I'm saying? Over time, there's been this sort of atrophying and condensation in the industry, condensing into doing the SEO style content. And so anyway, I believe a lot of people have been looking at Polygon being sold as a sign that really thought-provoking work in games journalism is on the way out, because there was increasingly this point where the bastion of good solid reporting and the bastion of good solid opinion and feature writing was Kotaku and Polygon. And Kotaku started to see a decline over time as it became, through Geo Media, which everyone kind of knows is not a great company, through Geo Media and through, Geo Media being really pressuring Kotaku writers to hit the Google search juice. And Polygon was standing tall and having writers and reporters work on topics that were, investigative pieces, opinion pieces, and feature pieces, but was also doing more and more guides writing, more and more guides work, and writers had to do that work in order to stay competitive in the field. And what ended up happening, essentially, is Polygon reached a point where it just could not sustainably continue to exist in the way that Vox deigned it so. Vox decided that Polygon was not worth keeping around. Vox probably decided it was not profitable enough or not making enough traffic or whatever based on the SEO model and approach. Instead of trying to do another business model like, a readership-based model like Aftermath does, they decided to cut it loose. That is my reading of it. And so I think for a lot of people, there was a situation where it basically felt like, okay, Kotaku is increasingly unable to do the reporting that once did, but Polygon is still there. Polygon can still do the feature writing. Polygon can still do, the investigative reporting from Nicole Carpenter. And today basically was a situation where everyone was shown and told, maybe that is not going to happen, actually. So I think for a lot of people, what ended up happening was today proved that Polygon could not even sustain itself anymore. It could not operate in a way where, or rather, I should say, Vox made the decision that Polygon could not sustain itself anymore and needed to be sold. Vox made the decision that Polygon was not going to cook. Vox made the decision that Polygon, the reporting that was happening, the features that were happening, the opinions that were happening could not continue to exist. And that is a major blow to the industry, because I think a lot of us felt that that Polygon was the last refuge, that it was the one place that demonstrated you could do that kind of reporting. Now, I do want to be clear here that I'm talking specifically about like established games media. I'm not talking about Aftermath or GameFile or any of the other sort of ventures out there. Like, I need to be very specifically clear here. I'm not trying to describe oh god, that's not good. I'm not in any way, shape, or form trying to describe, I'm not in any way, shape, or form factoring in Waypoint into this equation, because I do believe what Vice is allowing us to do at Waypoint is a really lovely thing that is allowing us to do a lot of opinion writing and work that is very in-depth reporting journalistic work. But I don't really want to compare Waypoint. I don't really want to factor in Waypoint right now and compare the place that I work at with Polygon right now. I just don't want to talk about Waypoint in this context right now, because I feel like removing it from the situation, talking about the landscape outside of Waypoint makes a lot of sense, because I think what we're doing at Waypoint will become more evident as we continue to report. As we continue to create content, it'll become evident the kind of work that we're doing and what we can bring to the games journalism landscape, and that we are doing a lot of work that's opinion feature oriented, that is it's reporting work. Oh, they surrendered? Okay. The work that we're doing at Waypoint is doing that kind of work that was at Kotaku and Polygon in the past, right? I feel like the work I've done at Waypoint is purposely done in the vein of that kind of work, okay? That is the sort of vibes I'm trying to bring to Waypoint. But I definitely feel like I want to pull Waypoint out of that conversation and not really have it in it while I'm analyzing the field, because I think it's important to treat Waypoint as sort of this wild card factor right now. And I don't really want to compare the place that I'm rating at right now to anything else happening in the industry. I feel like it's a little, maybe inappropriate, I think is the word I would use. It's kind of inserting the publication into the conversation. But anyway, my feeling right now is this, okay? So I feel like today is hitting really hard because everyone is it's slowly dawning on them that like the walls are closing in and the final nails are hitting the coffin. That the games journalism landscape has lost fanbite. Kotaku is not doing the reporting it used to be able to do. You know, everything is slowly, you know, Polygon is now no longer going to be able to do the reporting it used to be able to do. The sort of opinion and journalistic writing that we used to be able to like see in the industry is starting to go away more and more, and we're seeing signs of that. And I think what's happening is slowly but surely it's dawning on people that there is less room for investigative stories, for opinions, features, and opinion pieces and stuff like that. That things are getting more slopified, that things are becoming more SEO oriented, that games journalism, like, it's like if there was just a period where your average gamer would not be reading stuff like, say, would not be reading games journalism websites as much, but like maybe like the person plugged into Twitter would. Now even the person plugged into Twitter is starting to lose faith in games journalism. And so it's a situation where it's like, look, why is it getting worse? Why does everything have to get worse? So I talked about this earlier in the stream, but games journalism was already in a tough spot because there was a very bad business model put in place. Of journalism was never a very profitable industry, okay? I think BuzzFeed came in and people got dazzled by the idea that you could have this crazy successful, you know, like kind of like new digital like media venture in the space. And people got dazzled by the idea of making money off things. So people became obsessed with getting a return over investment, especially in like startup based media, like companies that just popped up. People became dazzled by the idea that online journalism could make them a lot of money, when traditionally journalism has never made anybody a lot of fucking money. Okay, like journalism has often been like barely profitable and exists as a public service and a good. Like traditionally up until the 90s, basically up until General Electric inserted itself in a fucking NBC, it was understood that journalism was a public service done, and people didn't get into journalism in order to make like a lot of money by investing into a company. And what's happened over time is that mindset has completely oh my, are you fucking kidding me, dude? I'm getting flashed of everything on site. Oh my god. What has happened instead is that digital media has been taken over by like these VCs that think they can plug in so much money into journalism and get a return over investment. And then when that wasn't fully happening, it caused like this domino effect that resulted in like double down, like trying to get a return over investment by getting as much traffic as possible from Google search, thus in effect forcing all writers to become, you know, jacks of all trades, masters of none, in order to get investors the return they're looking for by getting more traffic up, by making money from advertisers on articles. The whole business model is broken, is basically what I'm saying. That is the TLDR. And the business, that idea of just focus on Google search. Oh my god, nah, that was not a good idea. Just focus on Google search and everything will be good. That just simply did not work, and that whole entire market approach fell apart. The whole entire business approach fell apart, and it just resulted in, you know, basically what's happening now. That's the TLDR. I worked in the industry in the early 2000s. Even then, there was way more money in the industry back then. It was always constantly tenuous. The ad market has fallen apart. Facebook's pivot to video continues reaping a bloody harvest. I think the biggest problem, the advertising and like advertising affecting like copy is like definitely a problem, but I do think it continues to ultimately be the problem of doubling and tripling and quadrupling down on the Google search model, combined with searching to get monetizing slowly through ad revenue, instead of going for like a reader first model where you're trying to get subscription revenue, and thus correcting the balance and looking to break even and or just barely be profitable instead of making like insane amounts of money. That's sort of how I feel. Let's see. Yeah, I do want to stress that like it's not like the industry is completely and utterly broken. Like, oh Jesus, okay, I should clear that. I do want to stress that like the industry is not completely and utterly like, dead. Okay, like we have what's his fucking name? Oh, why am I blanking on it? So anyway, I was talking about there are still reporters in the space, right? So while I'm waiting for Valorant to reload, I'll switch to here. So the important thing to remember is like there are still these reporters in the space, right, that are like doing stuff, right? Like we have like Jason Schreier is still out there. We have like Cecilia Anastasio at Bloomberg. There's like the Bloomberg games reporting stuff. But it's like the number is dwindling very quickly. Like I think a lot of people don't realize how much losing Nicole Carpenter is like truly like losing more and more of investigative games journalism and like games journalism reporting. Like we are increasingly hitting a point where there is just not many people like writing, reporting in the industry. Like we're losing that increasingly. We are losing that aspect over time. We are losing reported work. We are losing the capacity for doing reported work. What is happening is we are still seeing some folks doing like these pieces that are like the Kotaku style stuff. We are still seeing like Kotaku style stuff from like places like Aftermath, or like these really important like investigative pieces from like Cecilia, for example, at Bloomberg, same with Jason. But it is definitely a situation where it's just like, you know, there's less and less people in the space. You know, Bloomberg has like this sort of, I don't want to say like a monopoly, but like there's so many of the people that are even doing like more, oh my God, I got cooked. Like so many of the people that are even doing like the more like reported features, investigative features in games media are now like just at Bloomberg, you know, it's like, or just at Aftermath, you know, so it's like, oh, it's basically only 2 publications now, you know what I mean? It's getting like that, which is a problem. So yeah, am I coming in clear? Is everything good now? Is everything good? So yeah, I do think, and for games journalism to continue to exist, I think it is going to be increasingly important to have like these monetization options that are beyond the ad revenue focus and like Google search traffic focus. I think there needs to be this readership model emerge. Nice. There needs to be more of that. I think honestly what needs to happen is looking in order to build a loyal readership and moving away from like trying to seek an ROI, return on investment. That is basically, I feel like, what is happening right now. I do think that things are going to get worse and not better. Like I hate to say it, but I think that is unfortunately what is going to happen. I think things are going to get worse, not better. I think, to be honest, I think that we are going to see more layoffs hit media and games media. I think that things are not going to get better. I do think that, I do know that a lot of writers are really struggling right now. I think it was Gita Jackson who encouraged people if facing layoffs to essentially work on skill sets outside of games media, and I cannot stress that enough as being the case. I mean, look at me, right? Like, I'm talking about this stuff right now and I'm writing at Vice, but what else do I do, right? Like, I spent a whole year being a LewdTuber, right? And like I still consider LewdTubing and VTubing as like I consider like my reporting like 50% of my career, my work at Vice 50% of my career, and I consider what I'm doing literally right now the other 50% of my career, right? Like I had to diversify my skill set. I had to be a LewdTuber and ASMRist. I had to learn how to audio edit and be an actor, you know? I had to learn these things, right? Like I had to diversify. Nothing wrong with VTubing. It's become a trend for a reason. No, and I love it. I love it. I absolutely love VTubing. I love doing ASMR. I love LewdTubing. I love all those things. Like I would not trade it for anything in the world. Like it's a passion of mine, and I love doing this so much. Like there's a reason why like I work 9 to 5 and then go VTube like 3 days of the week, you know. But and then work weekends doing the ASMR stuff because I love it. It's a passion of mine. You know, it's games journalists do have to diversify. I know for a fact that a lot of games journalists and a lot of journalists in general are in a really rough state right now. They are really feeling it. But yeah, I know for a fact a lot of games journalists are also just they're really feeling the pain right now too. And the vibes are not 100 emoji. Like it's really rough for a lot of folks. A lot of games journalists I know are like legitimately depressed. Like they are actively miserable because it's not that they can't find work. It's that the industry is broken. Like it's not working anymore. Like they can't get a job, period. They can barely get freelance. I know you did ASMR, so I need to check that out now. Yeah, it's on my website, ACValens.net. But yeah, it's in a really bad spot. And when I heard the Polygon news, like I teared up a little bit because like even though I feel so grateful that like I'm working at Vice, okay, and like writing advice, and I feel so grateful that I have that opportunity, and I feel insanely lucky, right? Because the reality in a lot of situations is there's nothing left and there's nothing available. There's nothing there. Like if you have any sort of like stable consistent rating right now, you are so insanely lucky. Like, and I think it is important to have like a lot of humility and like awareness around that too. What would you say are your favorite ASMRs that you have done? Oh, that's a good question. Some of them I can't talk about on stream because they're like blue site and they're like not Twitch safe. God damn, this neon's fucking cooking, by the way. This is crazy.